All right, guys, welcome to Doc Talk. Hopefully you guys weren't holding your breath this whole time because it's almost come up to a year.
Not quite.
Not quite. We're getting there. I still remember how to do this, I think. I'm your host, Owen Jones.
I'm Jason Parrott.
And this is Doc Talk. So today, I should say for the next couple of these episodes, we're going to be going over frequently asked questions that we get from customers and comments and reviews and all that good stuff. And we're going to start with the tip of the iceberg, floating versus stationary. So it's definitely the most common question. Why do people have floating? Why do people have stationary? And it's a good question. There's pros and cons to both, and there's reasons for using one or the other also. We've been, just to give you guys like a little bit of context, we've been developing a floating system for the last 3 years. We've never had an answer to that problem. And so, traditionally Tommy Docks was always like a stationary, dock system. And certainly that's still our, original product line. But we have expanded into floating. That does come out later this year in time for next season. And that system is, I would just say it took what made Tommy Docks stationary successful and applied it to kind of the floating world in a way. Modular, Tommy Docks stationary docks are 4 feet by 8 feet, modular, and you can put them in whatever configuration you want. With floating, to make it a little easier for shipping and for maneuverability, we decided to go with an installation. We decided to go with 4 by 4 feet. So that they're basically high density polyethylene cubes that have a really nice, herringbone grippy top surface to them, nice color, cool color in summer heat.
Endlessly customizable, just like our stationary system.
Yep. Yeah. And so, why did we create it? Well, I mean, that kind of is the segue into floating versus stationary, right? So,
we turned away a lot of business.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of people that couldn't do stationary.
They wanted to do business with us, but unfortunately, we didn't have an answer.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, pros to floating, right? It's adjustable, right? It adapts to rising and lowering water heights, whereas obviously stationary doesn't have that. So if you're in an area where you have 2-3 feet or more of fluctuation, unless you want to be out there every other day,
adjusting and
rearranging, it's just not practical.
Yeah, it's not practical.
Then we were talking earlier. You think of like Canada. There's an area where the water fluctuation isn't the reason that they have to do it. It's actually like it's just a very unique, I guess, sediment situation.
Yeah, their lake bottom conditions are not conducive to.
Yeah, so they have
piling installation or anything like that.
Correct. So. Yeah, they have boulders, which pilings don't like to go through boulders, right, generally speaking, and I think more commonly they have really steep banks.
Yeah, there's no gradual slope in their lake bottoms.
It's valleys of mountains and stuff. I mean, it's like super steep banks where your pipe would be 40 feet long. Just swaying.
Yeah, stability becomes a big issue when you get to long pilings. So
yeah, and I mean, let's talk a little easy installation. That's another. I would give that another pro for floating.
Definitely.
The nice thing about floating is you don't have to hold the weight while you're putting them together. Yeah. They float.
Yeah.
With stationary, somehow you have to be someone, either it's on a float or whatever, some way that you're supporting the dock system as you connect them.
As you're connecting them and setting them in place.
That requires more people.
A lot of people.
Strength, whatever.
Yep.
More tools, that kind of stuff. Floating, you can just put it together on the shoreline in the shallow and feed it out and, attach it as you need. Obviously, we've been talking about our system, which did I say the name of it? I think okay.
Flex, Flexx.
Yeah, so it's flex. So obviously, that was born of the flexibility of the system itself, right? You can do any shape, size, whatever configuration that you want. You don't have to buy um, different accessories to accomplish that, really. So with our flex system, short tangent, we do have. Let's talk a little bit about the accessories that we have kind of coming out with it. So initially, for next season, we have I guess you call it like our corner float,
Yep.
and so that could be like an interior gusset kind of thing if you're doing a platform or a T. It could also be like angled slips, which for people with really tight shorelines could be really helpful that they can angle in their boat. Um, if they don't have the width.
It adds more real estate to the dock ultimately.
Yeah. And you can do cool stuff. I mean, you can do an octagon. You can do a bunch of cool stuff with it. Also, just a sidebar, the interior gusset when you are doing like a T or a platform, it does add rigidity to a
Sure.
system. I mean, it's basically a cross brace.
Yep.
Right.
It's a gusset cross brace. Yep.
So it does add rigidity. We obviously have a floating pipe guide for those that can use pipe with floating. Obviously you go to Canada, you're probably not, you're going to use what we call like
Shore arm connection.
shore arm. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Shore arm connection, which is just basically a fixed arm that can go up and down with it, but it won't allow it to adjust this way. And, I think that'll be popular even in areas that don't necessarily need it just because of the rigidity it adds. But certainly in like Canada, it's a necessity because they're not going to be able to drive pipe. That's the reason they're doing floating in the first place. So, okay, let's talk about the, low maintenance. So I think this is kind of a loaded question because we get asked this. I feel like maintenance free is a term I hear 100 times a day.
Yeah, very common.
And I get it because I don't like doing stuff either. With floating, obviously, if we're talking about flex, it's going to be the easiest option from a maintenance standpoint.
Yeah.
Like no question. It's high density polyethylene. I mean, you don't do anything but rinse it off. I mean, there's nothing you have to do to it.
No.
It'll be around long after we are. And so, yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, our system would be probably the most maintenance free you could get.
Stainless steel hardware.
Yeah. So, I mean, it can be in brackish waters. It can freeze in the lake. I mean, we had ours frozen. And I don't even know if you guys know this, but we have just under a 10-acre lake at our headquarters here. I'm looking at it. We froze in our new system in that lake last January, and we had the guys take some sledgehammers to it.
We took our strongest guy in the warehouse and gave him a 16-pound sledgehammer and
said, "Don't come back till you put a hole in it."
On the coldest day of the
he
the
was
year.
very embarrassed.
We told him to go pound away at it. So,
Yeah.
which is what he did.
He came back without any damage to it, so that's a good sign. With it being brittle that time, that when those temperatures, that was when we thought it'd be most important. But obviously, our system isn't the only floating system. So, you look at like pressure treated lumber systems. Obviously, that has maintenance.
Yeah, there are still a lot of those that are going in. A lot of big projects, 2x8, 2x10 construction.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they have to add flotation underneath. So those are big projects, very involved, a lot of math, determining the flotation requirements for the weight of the structure.
That's right up, Jason. With your pencil and just taking notes, chewing on your tongue. So, okay, let's go back to, just talking about like some of the cultural and geographic differences between the two. For whatever reason it is, it's not from us, but for some reason the South, regardless of if they have a need for floating, they choose floating.
Yeah.
We've had, I can't even tell you how many trade shows I've been to where, hey, when are you guys going to get a floating system? Oh, you have a lot of water fluctuation? No. Oh, you have a really steep drop off? No. So why do you want floating?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what my neighbor has.
And that's it, exactly what it
Yeah.
is. They buy a waterfront property, they're going to replace the dock. They look to the left, they look to the right.
They both have floating
They both
systems.
have floating
I guess I got to
system.
buy a
That's what I
floating
need.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who are we to change the narrative? So we just developed a new product line instead. It was easier. But in the Midwest, it's the exact opposite, right? 90% stationary, which I actually, in hindsight, it is a little odd to me with us having ice and you having to, most people having to remove
Yeah, they
them.
remove them. Yeah, there's dock removal,
Yeah,
dock
we
installation.
always joke
every
that
year.
if you don't remove it, the ice will for you. I mean, it's kind of true. It depends on the conditions. Colton back there doesn't remove his.
Oh, that's right.
It's like Russian roulette every year.
Leaves it in there.
He just hopes he makes it one more year. I remember my dad's old neighbor had a old Tommy Dock system, and he would always brag about how it had been in 16 years. He'd never touched it. And then it was like year 17, it was just gone.
Well, in a lot of situations, it's not the structural integrity of the dock that takes it out,
Yeah.
that compromises it. It's when the spring of the year comes and
Yeah. So
ice.
it's all those variables, right?
Yep.
Like if you get okay, for this I'm not going to name names, but for this person, they were in a little bit of a bay, a little shielded from the current, a little shielded from wind, which is why I got away with it for 16
Yep.
years. The ice would slowly melt and it would slowly pull away from the dock, and it wasn't enough to break anything or pull anything or whatever. Well, obviously year 17, we got, and I don't remember exactly what the variables were, but it was probably a really quick thaw. The ice was still thick. It broke off. High winds pointed
Pushed
at
it
him.
back.
Goes right into it.
Slammed into the side of it.
It's a lot of inertia.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say their floating system would survive that either,
Yeah.
but I don't know many systems,
Your
if any,
chances
that
are
could.
better.
But I think your chances are a lot
Yeah.
better
For sure.
because it can ride over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about, the cost, because that's the other thing that everybody has. I would say now more than ever, everybody's a little price sensitive.
Definitely.
Although we can't do anything about your grocery prices, but as far as a dock system goes, a lot of the systems out there, let's just start with this. A lot of the systems out there are all using the same materials.
Yes.
And
Same
so-
manufacturing process, same
Yes.
materials.
Yes. And so when you see this huge discrepancy in price, you really do have to be critical about it because it's the same materials. And I think there's this perception that certain brands are potentially like better options because they're more expensive.
Yeah.
But maybe they're just more expensive.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So as far as floating versus stationary, and to be clear, what I just said applies to the floating world too. But in general, I would say floating's going to run you. What would you say? 20
to 30%.
That's what I
Say
would
in
say.
that range. Maybe a little north of that, depending on
Yeah.
what you're choosing from a.
I think a
product
big
line,
variable is accessories and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I mean, the fixed standoff arms, if you don't need
Yeah.
those, that kind of stuff. So I think it could go even north of 30%, depending on
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But in general, I would say floating's a little bit more expensive. From I guess from a maintenance standpoint, we kind of touched on that, but I would say certainly if it's a polyethylene, it's going to be your best option. But stationary also has, composite,
Your
aluminum.
composite. The technology has gotten quite good in that area.
Yeah, and I mean, so I guess I would say this: a floating dock. Here, this is a good phrase actually. I just made this up.
Here we go.
Here it is. You guys write this down. Put it on a plaque. Carve this into a block of wood. A floating system can always be used whether they need floating or stationary. A stationary system cannot always be used.
Correct. Yep.
So, another reason why we developed a floating system, we can answer the problem for a lot more people, having that option. So that kind of covers the differences. Yeah, we're excited for our new product. We hope you guys are too. Please give us feedback on it. And as far as this show goes, follow us on YouTube, like our page, all the good stuff. Share it if you see it on Facebook. We're going to be posting these more often than once a year. and I think it'll be, at least these next few will be some really good content for people looking this spring.
This is the time of year to start thinking about it, because spring is right around the corner. We hope.
Yeah. So thanks guys for watching. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.